Welcome to another episode of Cadence Fishing TV. And we're fishing today on one of my all-time favourite venues, the River Ribble, just on the outskirts of Preston. And as you can see, I'm just playing what I think is a really nice roach. Another beautiful roach. And I'm fishing with our brand ambassador and local expert, Alan Barnes. I think that's what Alan would call a crumper. Well, the pegs that we're fishing today are actually near to a peg that I fished before and had a wonderful day catching some roach then. And it's really quite cold, we've been having some hard frosts and the river's finding down after a big flood. So today's about the first day that you'd really fancy coming out and catching on the float. We got here really early, it was actually pitch black when we got here, to ensure that we got the good pegs, and we've been fishing for about an hour and already started to catch some nice fish. So I'm just sort of trying to understand and work my swim out, and Alan's fishing on the swim below me, so it'll be really interesting to see how he fishes today and approaches this wonderful venue. So I'm going to leave you in Alan's capable hands, and I'm sure he'll explain a bit more about where we're fishing in detail and what his plans are today.
Thanks for that, James. Well, yes, we're here today on the sandbank pegs at Waltonley Dale, Church Deeps as it's known locally. We've got St Leonard's Church on the far bank. Very well known pegs, noted pegs. And the reason that they're so popular is because it would appear that the roach, dace and chub do tend to migrate here in big numbers in the winter months. The river in the middle here can vary in depth from 17 feet, coming into the side to sort of 5 or 6 foot. The flow's very interesting, it tends to go all over the place. It's a bit of a challenge really to control the float in it and to try and make any sense of it really, but the fact is that there are a lot of roach to be caught here, and even on a bitterly cold day like this, James and I are quietly putting a few in the net. So that's basically where we are. As I said, it's a very popular piece of water in the winter months, and hopefully we'll be able to show you what we're doing today. I've set up two rods, a Cadence 15-foot number 1, which I've got in my hand at the moment, and that's teamed with a CS10 3000 reel loaded with 2/6 line. The float's a 10 number 4 alloy stem with an olivet and 2 droppers, and that's for fishing 2 to 3 rods out. I've set it up because as the clarity improves and the colour drops out, with the forecast being for a bright sunny day, the fish may well move out from the edge of the river. When I first started fishing this morning, when we still had a bit more cloud cover, I opted for a 14-foot number 1 Cadence, teamed with a trusty old Abu 507 Mark 1 reel. Again, that was loaded with 2-pound line. The float on that is a 6 number 4 wire stem, lightly shotted with number 10s, number 11 shot. In both instances I'm fishing with a 0.10 bottom, a size 20 Hayabusa black nickel 128 hook, which I find very good for roach fishing. And that 6 number 4 stick float, as I said, is lightly shotted and for fishing closer in. Now later on in the days the light values decrease again and the bigger roach start to mooch about again. Hopefully we'll catch 1 or 2 on that. But for now, because the sun's climbing up in the sky, I'm opting to fish just slightly further out, and we'll see what we can catch. I've also got a back shot behind the float. The wind's a bit tricky, it's coming upstream but it's blustering, sometimes it's coming downstream, and that back shot just enables me to trim the line and get the float to run through properly. As I said, the current is a bit all over the place. Sometimes you'll get the float pulling downstream nicely, sometimes it's hardly moving through at all, but you still get bites. You're not getting a bite every cast, but you're getting enough bites to keep you interested, and I've already got nearly 30 fish in 2 hours fishing, so it's not bad considering how cold it is. Right, well basically, as I was saying, you know, the flow is all over the place. 1 minute it's hardly moving through, the next minute it's wrapping through like the River Ribble in Denmark, and the fish seem to come better when it's flowing properly. And you've got a roach here that's got some cormorant damage looking at that. With it being winter and with it being pretty much a captive audience of fish here, you don't need to go mad with a feed. I think you could probably catch 20 pounds just with a couple of pints of maggots and a pint of hemp seed if you were so inclined. Well, there's a typical Ribble roach from this area in the winter. Lovely fish, 4 to 6 ounces, and because you've got a captive audience in the fact that the fish live here in the winter, you don't need to go mad with bait. You could probably get away with a couple of pints of maggots and a pint of hemp for a day's fishing. It's not that expensive really, and as with roach fishing at any time of the year, I'm a big believer in little and often, so maybe 6 to 8 maggots, maybe 2 or 3 times a cast if you're getting the float to run through the peg properly. If it's standing still, I don't feed because I really want to try and line them up and get them, you know, into the peg properly. If it's standing still, it can be churning and going backwards. I don't want feed all over the place. I really just want to keep them in a certain spot in the peg so that I can line them up and catch them. On the peg I'm fishing today, I'm feeding behind the float because I'm trying to line the fish up in a key hot spot in the peg. Because the flow is varying, it's making that slightly awkward because sometimes the peg stands still, sometimes it runs through. Basically what I want to do is make sure that I'm feeding when the river is actually running in the right direction, so I keep them lined up in one place in the peg. And here we've got a prime example of me achieving that and getting the right presentation. But you'll notice even while I'm playing the fish, I'm still feeding, because I do like to feed little and often when I'm fishing for roach. It keeps them active, keeps them interested, and keeps them where you want them. So what I'll do now, bring the fish in, just flick 6 to 10 maggots in. They can be going down through the water column while I unhook the fish. Fish is in the net. Rebait. And I can flick it out. Mend the line, feed, and we're back in again, all in sort of 30 seconds. That's just experience. I've been fishing the river for 40 years now, and like anything in life, you know, good practice comes, you know, good practice in being able to do something well comes through practice. It's as simple as that, really. And just understanding what you're trying to achieve with your feeding, really. Roach do like little amounts of bait fed quite often. It gets them competing in your peg. I think it's a way that the bigger roach tend to end up coming into the peg, because they see a lot of activity, they see other fish feeding, they want to know what's happening, and you start to get bites from better quality fish. And I've got some very nice stamp roach in the net. You know, they're averaging 8 ounce, I'd say, today. So in the process of hooking this roach and playing it, I've actually fed, by the time I just flick some more in, 3 times during the one trot to catch one fish. But roach do like competing with one another, and it works, simple as that. There you go, another classic Ribble winter roach. Now that's a proper Ribble roach, and it's what's known in the trade as a crumper.
Well, that was a cracking roach that Alan's just had. I've been getting some nice ones as well, up to about £1. And really that's the great attraction for me fishing here. I mean, I love catching quality roach like that, but the chance of catching a 2-pounder is what keeps bringing me back. Alan told me quite a lot about the peg while we were waiting for the sun to come up this morning, and he explained that where I am, it's quite a boily, turbulent peg. You can see that there's big areas of slacks and boils all around here. I think it must be due to some big ledges and shelves, and I spent quite a lot of time plumbing up to start with, and there's a defined channel probably about 2 rod lengths out, then it seems to shallow up towards the far bank, and it seems to shallow up as I go down the peg, and really the peg's constantly changing. It's quite a hard peg to work out, and because of that I've decided to fish with a Bolo float rather than a stick float, and I'm fishing it with a bulk and quite a positive dropper, mainly because I think fishing a stick float here would be quite difficult because of the constantly changing nature of the swim. And what I'm trying to do is feed one main area and then obviously present my Bolo and try and control it as best I can around that area. At the moment the flow's completely gone again, and at other times it's flowing quite nicely, but I've been catching some great roach, and it just proves there's a lot of fish here, and it's just a great challenge to try and work out the best way to present the bait and the best way to feed. Sometimes when it's not flowing like this, I'm finding that I'm sort of drawing the float back into the slightly slacker water, and I'm being rewarded by fish. I've had quite a few nice roach and 2 or 3 perch as well, just in that slacker water. So I just wonder sometimes if the bait that I'm feeding further out is actually ending up a bit closer in. There's another beautiful silver roach. I've decided on a slightly different approach for feeding as well. You know, if I was fishing and the swim was a bit more consistent in flow, I'd feed regular and often like I always do on a river. But because it's so unpredictable, what I've decided to do today is feed heavily with hemp, because hemp's heavy and it's a great roach attractor anyway, but I'm hoping that hemp's going to at least get down in an area where I'm fishing, and then perhaps only every 2 or 3 casts I'm putting a big pouch full of casters in, and I'm trying to do that when the peg's less boily again, so that I'm trying to get my casters down around about where I'm presenting the float. Even though I'm feeding casters at the moment, the best hook bait's double red maggot. I've tried single red, bronze and single and double caster, but for some reason double red seems the best, and I'm fishing a 18 B560. I was hoping that by feeding casters I might attract some of those big massive roach that this stretch is famous for, so I'm just happy to be getting bites on such a cold day. So I was talking about feeding heavily with the hemp, and I'm feeding 1 or 2 big pouchfuls every cast. It's something I do a lot, particularly in the winter when I'm roach fishing, and it really seems to help draw and attract the fish into your swim, and also try and confine them into a more concentrated area. That roach was right next to where I was feeding the hemp, so I think it's definitely proving a good trick today in this boilie peg. Actually, it's not a roach, it's a big dace. Set up 2 rods today. They're both CR10 16 footers, the number 1 and the number 2. On the number 1 I'm using a 2 gram Steve Mayer finesse bolo, and I'll set my other 16 footer up, the number 2, with a bigger 4 gram bolo, just to give me another option in presentation and if I wanted to fish a bit further out. But so far this 2 gram finesse bolo's worked really well. It's not too pacey, and I'm able to control the float really nicely, especially with the longer 16 foot rod. And it's got about the right sort of balance between enough weight to get the float out to where I'm fishing and also to be able to control the float. I find on anything but smaller rivers, so medium size and bigger rivers, the 16 foot rods are a massive advantage. Just makes the whole job of fishing a bolo so much more efficient and easier. And these 16 footers are very, very light in weight, so you don't get too much fatigue when you're fishing. And I've also combine the rod with our CS8 4000 reel, and being magnesium, it's very light, so even though I'm fishing with a 16 foot rod, it doesn't really feel like it. It's lovely and lightweight and balanced. I don't know if you can see it, but the peg's just starting to boil up again now, and this is happening sort of sporadically, and I'm finding that it just knocks the fishing on the head for 5 minutes, and then as soon as the swim starts to flow naturally again, I'll definitely start to get a better catch rate. I just wonder if it's because the river's dropping. There's about a foot on, and I think that extra water is making this peg quite turbulent and difficult to fish. So again, with this roach, I just let the float come in a bit closer to the bank. I was probably fishing about a rod and a half out there, and the flow was hardly moving, so I was just holding the float back slightly and rewarded with another roach. So it's proving to be a really challenging swim, but one that I'm really enjoying fishing, and obviously catching some beautiful fish.
Some of you may be interested to know that the opposite bank of the river is actually owned by the Houghton family estate. They own Houghton Tower, which is where I told you about James I naming the loin of beef the sirloin. It's a little known fact as well that at that time William Shakespeare used to visit Houghton Tower. He taught English there. But when he came up here, he changed his name from Shakespeare to William Shakeshaft. Not a lot of people know that. Right, one of the products that I use to make the stick float behave properly is something that some of you may know about, and it's called mucilin. It's a grease. You get it in a tub like this. It comes with a circular cloth that's coated in the silicone wax, and you just treat that by rubbing your line between that for 3-4 feet above your float. That really helps it to come off the water very well when you're either mending it to control the float, to take a bow out of the line, anything like that. So that's one thing that I'd advise you to buy if you want to go stick float fishing. It's not very dear to buy. All tackle shops have it. Fly anglers use it all the time for treating, you know, the leaders. The other product that perhaps you haven't heard of is something that was developed really for carp anglers, and it's a product called Grease Lightning by Kriston. I've been using this now since about 1994. Dave Chilton, who owned Kriston, I don't know if he still does, invented this stuff, and it's a liquid silicone again. And basically you just put a few dabs on your line, on your reel, and it helps in two ways, because it coats all the guides with a fine film of silicone, which means that you can cast slightly thicker lines further distances because there's less friction, less tension going through the guides. The other benefit of it is that it is brilliant at making your line float. And obviously when you're fishing top and bottom with a stick float, you want it to do that. You don't want your line sinking under the surface, because that results in what I call sellotape strikes, which is when you strike and you hear this great big ripping noise as the line comes off the water. 9 times out of 10 you're going to either miss the fish or bump them doing that. You just want a nice clean pickup off the surface with the float. You know, it's almost like the fish doesn't even realise that you've hooked it, and then you see the float come out of the water and you see the telltale fight. So that's that. The other thing I just want to talk about, if I may, is the shotting pattern on the float, and just a quick look at the float itself, if we may. Now, this is an old Dave Thomas wire stem stick float. Takes 6 No. 4 shot. These were made in about 1979. Around about the time, well, he became world champion in 1981 at Luddington on the Warwickshire Avon, but I think these floats date back to about 1979, 1980. They've got a lovely shoulder and a pointed top, but they're beautiful in that they behave really well. You can hold back hard on them without them riding out the water. The fact that they've got a wire stem makes them behave when you're in a swim with a bit of divergent current like we have today. They'll sit down and they'll behave well. Now what I always find on the Ribble in winter is that to catch those bigger roach, you've got to fool them. And whilst I've set up another rig with an Olivet, I've caught most of the fish today on this lightly shotted float, and it's basically shotted with either single 8s or double 8s together, strung out at about 4-inch intervals, coming down finally to 8s and then to 11s. Now, some river anglers don't go below a number 8 shot as the drop in here as the hook. But I'm a big believer that roach, in particular, watch every shot drop through. They watch the hook bait drop through. When I fish Winter League matches on the Nene, catching roach on hemp in years gone by, you'd be amazed at how many more roach you catch if you had 4 number 11 shots strung out instead of 2 groups of number 11 bulked together in 2s. And time without number, I've caught better stamped roach than a lot of people around me, simply because I think that getting the hook bait to drop through at the same speed as your loose feed is critical for catching stamped roach.
So this is the rig I'm using, and it's really simple. I've got an Olivet with 3 number 8s below it, and then I've formed a dropper with another 3 number 8s. You'll notice that the hook length to the dropper is shorter than the bulk to the dropper, so that's helping me not tangle my hook around the bulk. And fishing with a Bolo can be a method that does cause lots of tangles, and that's my mentality, is keep the rig really simple like this with a good bulk. And another key factor is you need to really feather the line to ensure that the rig lands in a straight line. If I was just sort of fishing a rod length out, I wouldn't mind spreading those shot out and maybe moving the bulk up and getting a much nicer presentation. But as I'm casting 3 or 4 rod lengths out, I just know that if I was to do that, I'd spend most of the day untangling tangles. That's the float I'm using, which is the Steve Mayer Finesse Bolo, and I really love these floats when I'm fishing a swim that's not too powerful. They've got a great shape, which means you can just lean into it and slow the float down and hold it back without it riding out the water, but also it doesn't cause too much of a disturbance when you strike. So that's a great float. I'll just show you what I mean about feathering the line when I'm casting. Sometimes if I'm fishing a long way out and it's windy, I will cast overhead, but my favoured way of casting is just to hold the dropper shot and do a underarm sweep like that, but make sure that you really do stop and feather the float before it hits the water. Well, Alan, that was a wonderful day on the River Ribble again.
Yeah.
I've absolutely loved catching those roach.
Brilliant.
It was worth the early start for me, and just brilliant despite the cold.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a tough day from a weather point of view, but the fishing's been amazing, and you know, it seems that every time you come up we have a good day, so glad you've come up and enjoyed yourself.
Oh, it's absolutely great. Let's have a look at what you got.
Okay,
Well, Alan, that's a cracking net of fish, and we've weighed them at 20 pound, haven't we?
Yes, yeah, brilliant, great fun, really enjoyed it. And this little daddy,
that's the crumper, isn't it?
Yeah, he's the cherry on the top, isn't he? You know, so
absolutely brilliant.
Really pleased.
Yeah, in just 4 hours in these conditions, I think that's a spectacular net, mate. Well done.
Yeah, thank you very much, James. And I just wondered if you might have a bit more than me.
No chance, nothing like it.
Yeah, let's get him back here, shall we? Back to fight another day. Blimey, James, that's a decent net you've got there.
Well, yeah.
I don't think there's much in that, do you?
Well, I'm actually absolutely thrilled. And it was 19 pound 8 ounces, wasn't it? So not quite enough. Does
that mean, like Paul Kazira would say, you owe me a quid?
Well, that was there, mate. That's okay. More important.
All right.
I'll stick them back, all right?
Yeah. Some nice stamped fish there, James.
Thanks for watching. We're back on the Ribble. We're catching some beautiful roach on the Bolo. Check out our YouTube video and learn more about it.